Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
I was going to start this week by saying you gave us a coded message last time when I asked the question about AFCON and what was happening at AFCON. I'm not sure I still understand your message from last time because it was really in parables. But now that Nigeria has progressed to the finals, is your favorite team still in the game?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Now I must come out to say that. Yes, my favorite team is still in the game. But there is there's something about Nigeria that it somehow it is at its best when challenged. When it thinks that it's nothing, the way they play, you in fact wonder whether they have the coach or not. And then and that they're on the verge of losing, and then they up their game. And that's the story of Nigeria. That is why, I mean, I don't know how many books have been written on Nigeria itself. The house has fallen. The house is about to fall. The house will fall. And yet somehow here we are, 63 or 64, going to 64 years after independence. The house has not fallen. So maybe the story of AFCON is the story of Nigeria itself. Uh, I mean, do you realize how many, when you go on the streets of Nigeria, anytime during the day, turn any corner, there is a fight about to break. People screaming at the top of their voice, people removing their tops, ready to become Muhammad Ali. And at the end, nothing happens. So our successes in in AFCON has been heart wrenching. I must say that there is no game I have watched that I could say, no problem, we're gonna win this. Oh, no problem, it's all in the kitty. No, till that referee blows the final whistle, my heart is not at rest. So, in anticipation of the next question you are going to ask, what will happen on Sunday? Of course, I've got to say Nigeria will carry the cup. But we are up against a team that also seems to have the same kind of the same kind of thing that we have, which is Cote d'Ivoire. Till the last minute also, you are never. In fact, Cote d'Ivoire is the most lucky of all the teams. because they were already out. But according to the rules of FIFA, you got to pick the best of the losers and then bring them in. And now look, they are the final. So we will carry the cup. I'm sure they won't
Maybe I
disappoint
should get
us.
maybe I should get a camera positioned on you while the game is going on, so we can see your reactions and not just when the kicks are going on. Uh, anyway, let me start with this. The breaking news in the UK this week uh, about the king being diagnosed with a serious illness, particularly when he's only just taken over the throne. He's only just been coronated not too long ago, and the approach that the royal family is taking towards the sick amongst them. Um, what do you say to that situation, sir? With the news about the king having developed cancer.
um, as you rightly said in your intro, uh, it's waited so long, um, and it's a pity. Uh, and you could say that the number of months that he has spent on the throne, the changes that he has brought about, especially in terms of commitment of the throne within the boundaries allowed by the unwritten constitution. He's been on the right side of history. And for this to then come on, of course, this is our fault. When I say our fault, we were not paying attention to history. There's been a history of cancer in the royal family ever since the time of Queen Victoria, but they don't talk about it. They don't release the cause of this, the cause of that, and so on. Even the father of the late Queen Elizabeth died of cancer. He was such a heavy smoker anyway. So that should always be at the back of our mind that this is a family that has cancer in the family history. That he has come out openly to admit in his own case. It's a credit to him. Um, 2 weeks ago, there was a Nigerian professor, but he's a professor in a teaching hospital in Wales, and he came to Nigeria. He's an authority on the prostate. He came to Nigeria and he was invited to give us a talk at one of the clubs that I belong to in Lagos. He ruined the lunch of everybody. It's an all-male club. And the way he talked about the prostate and the need to have tests done as early as if you're 35, and even made an aside comment about King Charles going into hospital to have his own attended to. At that time, nobody knew that cancer would be discovered. So he was only talking about the prostate. And because the average age of members of that club is probably 35 or 30, we all kept looking at each other as if the symptoms this man is talking about, have you checked your own? Have you done this? Have you done that? I mean, as I said, we couldn't eat anymore. And then a week later to hear that in removing the prostate, they then discovered that the cancer was there, and then he announced it. We can only pray for him. I don't know how many people on this platform have read about the treatment for cancer. But the chemotherapy is not the most pleasant treatment you could have a human being go through. It's not pleasant at all. And so I'm not surprised that they cut off that part of his exposure to the public, because what the chemotherapy does to the human body is not really something we should talk about. So we should wish him well. We should wish that he will get over this, and wish his family, I mean, extend their sympathy to the family, especially Prince William, who's rather young, uh, and on whose shoulders a lot of the responsibilities of the king will now fall. We should just wish them well.
Some people have started to talk about regency and the transfer of power to will. Is it too early for that type of conversation to be brought up? Clearly, it's a bad situation, but it's not a death sentence at this point in time. Do you think that King Charles III may feel that it's probably time for him to start to consider handing over to his son because of something like this?
No, there are two issues we are mixing. He could hand over a lot of his responsibilities to the Prince of Wales, and even share those responsibilities with other members of the royal family, like Princess Anne, and so on and so forth. The other concept is that of regency, which will be activated by a written document that says the king can no longer perform his duties. And that now empowers the regent to now exercise practically, I use the word advisedly, practically all the powers of the king. Without that concept of regency being activated, there are obviously some powers of the king that Prince that Prince William or the Princess Royal will not be able to activate. But the concept of regency is a very serious one. it's not one to be activated. It's not one to be activated easily or lightly. The last regent Britain had was King George the Fourth. This was before he became king. His father, George the Third, who lost the American colonies, had practically gone bananas. So his son had to now act as a regent. And the regency lasted until he became King George the Fourth. So we're going all the way back to the 18th century or that kind of that's about 3 centuries ago. So it's not a concept to play with. Obviously, what King Charles will be going through will be the effect of the chemotherapy on him, not the fact that he has the cancer. But please, if there are people on our platform who know more about this, or who have, whose families have gone through this, and who can put us in a proper light, let them indicate to you that they want to talk, and so that I'm not just the only one,
I will look out for any raised hands. So to everyone, please feel free to raise your hand on any of the topics that we're discussing today. And once I see that, I will bring you up. So let me go to Senegal and look at the situation that's also developing there from the point of view of another election being postponed till I think 10 months' time at the minute. How do you react to that information? And some violence is again breaking out in yet another African country. How do you react to that, sir?
What, what, what is Saleh up to? Why would a president want to destabilize his country? He was one of the tough voices behind the sanctions on especially Niger, but let's put the others together. And he could see the consequences for ECOWAS of the pushback of those three countries. And we've said this, a lot of countries have said this, that it is civilian coups, sit tight presidents, violating their own constitution, that often leads to military coups. And that therefore, if you want to avoid military coups, at least one of the things you should do is to avoid interfering with your constitution negatively. And then he goes and he does this. I'm quite happy to some extent that ECOWAS, African Union, European Union have come up to waive the red card or the yellow card on this matter. But I am not happy about the statement emanating saying we are calling on the stakeholders to please agree to a new date. No, that's not the solution. The solution is to keep to the dates laid down by the Constitution and not to, because then what is the point? In what way then is the difference between what you are then doing to Senegal and what you refuse to do to Niger? Now you are saying Senegal is allowed. Is that what you are saying? To to interfere with the Constitution? That amounts to a civilian coup. And for the life of me, I cannot understand African leaders. And when we know what this President Star went through in the hands of the man he took over with, why would he want to do this? Why? I'm short of words to describe this. And I think what ECOWAS should do, really, if they can get a majority of them to go along with that, is to denounce in a strong term the development in Senegal. Now, some people may say, hey, wait a minute. Supposing he also then decides to leave ECOWAS, are we not running the risk of ECOWAS disintegrating, implosion from the inside? But you can't allow people to break the set of rules that they voluntarily agreed to. You can't. And I'm not saying if ECOWAS is then going to blow up on that scheme, let him do so. No, that will probably be irresponsible on my part. I think that ECOWAS should quickly send a delegation to Senegal. That's number one. Number two, ECOWAS should quickly send a series of delegations to the superpowers of this world to tell them that under no circumstances should they, by action or inaction, give the president of Senegal the wink and the nod to go down the path of what he has started. And let France, that still has a lot of influence in Senegal, including a military base there, call the president of Senegal to order.
So, on that third point you raised there, aren't you concerned that people might then say you are inviting the French to come back into African politics when actually people are trying to kick France out, as we've seen in some of the countries in which France has been kicked out from Africa?
Well, when it comes to policy, there has to be an element of flexibility. You measure what you're advocating with the objective that you are targeting. We cannot ignore the fact that there's a French military base there. That's number one. Number two, we cannot ignore the fact that France has a lot of influence in Senegal. So if we want to prevent Senegal from going down that road that will create unfavorable issues and aggravate the situation in West Africa, if that's what we have to do, then let us do so. So often, it's not the policy that is wrong, it's the objective to which the policy is targeting. And in this case, I mean, it's like saying you are putting UN troops in the field, whereas the UN was established to prevent the use of force. There are times when the use of force is justified. So there are times when those who have influence over an actor, activating them, provided the objective is within the general objectives of your organization.
And to your point around the disintegration, looking at it from the outside as a layperson, one would say, well, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they succeeded in, well, so far, there's still a long journey to go, but so far they seem to have succeeded in carving out their own way and deciding the direction that they want to go. And maybe this would, or that would have emboldened Senegal and will continue to embolden other African countries. That if these three can do it and they seem to be getting away with it, well, we do what we want within the context of our own country.
That's the dilemma. That's the dilemma that policymakers often confront. It's a question of the list of the worst possible options. Obviously, you cannot allow Senegal to get away with what it is trying to do. Secondly, you cannot, because you don't want a disintegration of ECOWAS, allow those other three to get away with their illegality. So, what can you do? And this is where diplomacy comes into play. There are brighter brains, I'm sure, in the various ministries in ECOWAS who at this very moment will be battling with this conundrum to come up with acceptable policy. Again, if I can use, an analogy, the fact that the UN has not been able to stop the war in Ukraine, has not been able to stop the war in Gaza, does not mean we should condemn the United Nations or call for it to be scrapped. I mean, as I said, there are bright young men and women in various ministries who precisely will be battling with this set of alternatives and what do we do? I really don't have an answer. I think that is the basic thing. I don't have an answer.
Let me talk about Imran Khan. I know we've talked about him on this program before, but he seems to be in quite a bit of deep waters, I would say. Um, what's your view on the sentence in there and the direction that things are taking, sir?
As you rightly said in your intro, we've discussed the Imran Khan syndrome because it almost became a syndrome in Pakistani politics. And I had pointed out that he was playing with fire, and that the only way you dismount from the back of a tiger, if you are not careful, is to end up inside the tiger. It looks to me as if the policy he adopted after he was impeached was to go on a program of incitement of his supporters. And I was warning that he was playing with fire. Number one, we all know he didn't win that election in Pakistan. The military arranged victory for him. To have embarked on a policy of antagonizing the military was very unwise. Having been removed, he ought to have known. I mean, when the election that he won, several of his opponents were in jail. He ought to have read the tea leaves that if he continued the way he was continuing, he's going to end up in jail. And that's what has happened. To me, it seems that the judicial system even gave him a long rope. And now elections are about to be held. Where is he? In jail. Over several cases. And they still have not exhausted the cases they have charged him with. You know, because he was the no, the brown eye boy of Pakistan politics. He thought he could get away with whatever he decided to do. Yes, he was a brilliant cricketer. Being a brilliant cricketer does not make you a brilliant public, um, a brilliant politician. But he forgot that. And now, finally, the law has caught up with him. Let that be a lesson to what we've just discussed. Senegal. The only way a sitting president gets away with breaking his constitution will be with the help of the police and the military. And sooner or later, members of the security forces will come to the conclusion that, well, the guy is there because of our support. Why can't we step into the shoes and try to do the job ourselves? And that is then when a coup happens. You cannot win an election in Pakistan without the active support of the military. You might as well accept that as a given. Accept that as a given. And don't try to imagine that you got there by the brightness of your brain. No, that's not what happens in Pakistan. So the law has finally caught up with them, and we will see the consequences.
There is a question here, sir, that I want to put to you, and this is from Ed Apata. Please forgive me if I did not pronounce the name correctly. But this person says, Prof, would you consider ECOWAS's reaction to the Senegalese situation vis-a-vis Mali, Guinea, Bissau, and Niger hypocritical and double standard?
I won't go that far because actually the statement, right now in Abuja, there is an emergency meeting of the ECOWAS committee or commission on, I don't know, I think, anyway, I think you know what I mean, to deal with situations like we've just had in Senegal at ministerial level. And they've come out condemning what the president of Senegal wants to do. Now, the meeting is supposed to continue until tomorrow. And I suppose whatever their final recommendations are will then go to probably an emergency summit of the leaders of ECOWAS. So they haven't allowed the president of Senegal to get away with it unless I am mistaken that there is a resolution that has escaped my attention. But I don't think they are treating what the president of Senegal is doing with soft hands. But it is going to present them with, as I've said earlier on, it's going to present them with a difficult situation because you are dealing with a sitting president. So ECOWAS, in terms of its protocol, has to be cognizant of the fact that they have a sitting president who is breaking the law on their hands. But you could draw his attention to the fact that, he may end up with a coup on his hands. Is that what he wants for his country? And draw his attention to what has happened in, especially Guinea, that, you've mentioned, or is it Guinea-Bissau, where a sitting president also interfered with the constitutionality of the elections, and the military that they had used to suppress demonstrations turned against him, and that military is still in power. Is that what the president of Senegal wants? I mean, I would recommend, anyway, I've given my recommendations, no need repeating myself, but I would recommend sending a high-powered delegation to him, sending a high-powered delegation to France, sending a high-powered delegation to Washington, and any other country that has influence on the president of Senegal to draw their attention to what is going on. He cannot legitimize an illegality by saying his parliament has ratified what he has done. We all know how pressure can be brought to bear upon a parliament, to adopt the position that the Senegalese parliament has adopted. The opposition has alleged that its members were dragged out of the parliament to prevent them from voting. So will you accept that as a legitimate exercise of parliamentary power? No.
So is international law facing a challenge? And maybe in a broader sense, diplomacy, because we have all these wars just breaking out in different countries, people choosing to extend the time they have in government, ignoring the constitution. And we still have the situation in Democratic Republic of Congo, where the battles continue to rage in that area. Is diplomacy and international law failing to evolve with the time to stop this kind of things from happening?
I believe that if you go back into our records, at the second time, after we set up this platform, I pointed attention to several things in terms of implication of factors for the stability of the international system. And I remember saying, one of the things I remember saying was that the most dangerous time for the international system is when the topmost power starts to descend and an emerging top power starts to ascend, and along the line there could be a miscalculation as to when to challenge each other by exercising influence in, if you like, trouble areas of the world. And that I thought we were at that time. Obviously, the United States haven't read the tea leaves properly, got out of Afghanistan. But Israel has now dragged it in the Middle East into confrontations that I'm sure America would rather not have. Russia has entered into a confrontation with NATO in Ukraine, a confrontation that I'm sure the United States would rather not have. And you've pointed out several other problem areas. And, China wisely is just standing aside and watching all the cookies crumbling in terms of where America asserts its leadership position. And I believe China has come to the conclusion that there's no need to get involved. The cookies will fall on their laps. They will just pick up whatever pieces they want rather than get involved. I'm sure that is what we are seeing in terms of the instability in the political, the instability in global affairs. What we should all be praying for is that the instability does not blow up beyond where it is at the moment. Everybody keeps saying in terms of the Middle East that they don't want it to go beyond Israel and Hamas. But the fact is, Israel is bombing Syria. Uh, well, the Hutus are bombing ships. Britain and the United States are bombing the Hutus, even though bombing them is not going to diminish their capability of, as one says, uh, you know, uh, I don't, okay, revolutionaries don't have to win all the time. They just have to win only once. And that's the ones you will hear about. Whereas when you are confronting them, you have to win 99.9% of the time. There is no way bombing the Hutus will diminish or will crush their capability to hit those ships. Yet they continue to do so. They are bombing Iraq and so on in order to diminish the power of Iran. And yet we all know that this is not going to diminish their power. Now you may ask me, Prof, are you now saying America should just fold its hands and allow Iran to run riot in the Middle East? And my answer is no, that's not what I'm saying. But the conundrum created by all this bombing and cross-bombing by different actors create a situation in global politics that leads to the kind of question you have raised. Are we on the verge of a third world war? Are we on the verge of destruction of a system built up over how many years? Since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, without having a stability activated mechanism in place. But that is what we seem to be facing.
Yeah, to the question though, sir, because we see the bit around the international law and how that law is being played. You know, we talked about a few weeks ago, we talked about South Africa taking Israel to the ICJ and the ruling there. We talked about Russia, Ukraine to the ICJ. We talked about the ruling there. And then we also start to see, bless you, sir, we also start to see some changes in the interpretation of law, particularly with the case in the United States where parents are now being sentenced for offenses committed by the children. Or at least in a landmark case, we've seen it happen. And now we have the precedents. So it feels to me like law is maybe being interpreted differently, or maybe law is always been there to put these things in place, but for some reason, something has changed in the psyche of society in how we interpret the law, that is worrying for some of us. I know you must have heard about the case of the family in the US where the mother has been sentenced for what the son did. What's your take on that, sir?
You know, I'm sure everybody has heard of Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of Britain. She came in with this idea that you can do whatever you want. Uh, it's up to you. She had no concept of societal responsibility. She has no concept that actions have repercussions. But even for young children in school, do your thing. That was her mantra. Now, several decades later, we are living with the consequences of that mantra of do your thing. Society is now pushing back, as far as I'm concerned, a bit too late, because some of us at that time pointed out that the concept of society is one for all and all for one. It's not that you leave each person to do his own thing, and we should push back. Now society is pushing back. The, because of the political because of the political issues in the United States, members of Congress are afraid to make laws governing gun control, gun possession, and we are seeing the result of it, in which a 16-year-old will take a gun to school and shoot up his colleagues, his classmates, his teachers. And even when these teachers, because in this particular case, the teachers brought the attention of the parents to the fact that their son has access to guns. And in fairness to even this boy, he was appealing for help. Help me. Those were the last two words in the message, which is scrawled on his table in school. They called the attention of the parents to it. I mean, after all, it was the dad who bought the gun. But the parents abdicated their own responsibility by not listening to the school authorities. And what the jury then did in this case is to say, don't come and argue before us that it is only this boy and this student alone who is responsible for shooting up the school. You, as parents, have a responsibility. Society has a responsibility for maintaining society. So society cannot allow society to disintegrate. That is my own interpretation of the judgment in this case. Now, there are other states in the United States that have passed laws to say, no, you cannot hold parents responsible. It's only the boy who pulled the trigger that you can have responsible, that you can hold responsible. And that is the effect of the influence of the gun lobby in the United States. And I think what we are starting to see is society now pushing back. You can, of course, expect that the gun lobby will also now again push back against this concept of parental responsibility. I think it's a good judgment. I hope and pray that a lot of nations will copy the reasoning behind that judgment and start enforcing the concept that if society does not protect itself, society will disintegrate. You cannot leave it to a 16-year-old boy to exercise the judgment that he's responsible for his action. No, he's still too young. He's still in the formative stage. And I think that society should put its feet down and hold society responsible. When I use the term society, I'm talking a generic term. It could be the school that will be responsible. You know, there was a time when even school principals were afraid to report children to their parents for fear of being sued. And so they pulled back and allowed the boy to misbehave and do all sorts of things. That is the consequence of this 1970, 1980 political Thatcherite philosophy of doing your own thing.
Thank you very much, sir. On that note, I wouldn't take you too much over time today, but thank you very much for your time. To our viewers who have been here as well, thank you. And for those that ask questions, thank you. We'll be back same time next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Nigerian time, and we'll cover all the breaking issues at the time. And hopefully someone will be celebrating. I wish I can catch a footage of the reaction of someone during the game on Sunday. Let me see, maybe I can plan that somehow. And then we show that here.
Well,
we'll see
we wish them well.
We wish them well. All right. Good night, everybody. See you next week.